These are how critics today measure movies, and it's not good, bad, indifferent. It is there enough representation in here? What are the messages? If it's a right-of-center message, recoil. My favorite example is that there was a critic who reviewed a movie called Kin. It's about some space aliens and this teenager is trying to protect his family, and the teenager gets a space gun, and he's going to use that space gun to help his family. The critic went ballistic, gave it an F, and said, how dare you put a gun in a teenager's hands with what's going on in the culture today? Is that a fair review?
There's so many wonderful things about, being old. I remember when Hollywood actually, liked the United States and wasn't a political arm of the progressive movement. One of the guys I love to talk to the most, Christian Toto. How do you describe your work?
I'm a film critic and Hollywood journalist who covers the scene from the right. I think that's a succinct way to kind of encapsulate it.
Cranky guy. How's that? Great.
No.
So
I have my moments.
I used to have a real job once, and I was a stagehand. And up at CU, a couple times, I worked with Ebert. I'm blanking out on the first name. Roger Ebert. And I would be running the projector next to him as he'd deconstruct a film, and I'd stop it, and they do it. And it was just fascinating. I thought he was just this wonderful, wonderful film reviewer that when he did this, made a movie like The Third Man, which one that he did, just come alive, and the stories and this and that. Hollywood movies, television, is how we tell stories. Not only that, it's how we connect people. And now that we have 500 channels, I think we're a bit more disconnected. When we had 3 channels, everyone knew. If I said Lucy on a chocolate conveyor belt full of chocolate, we all know what that meant.
Yeah.
Today it isn't. What's different today? Because I can barely stand to watch movies today just because they keep preaching at me.
I mean, everything's different. I mean, the way we see movies, how we see movies, the screens, large and small, streaming. I think there are so many technological evolutions that it's hard to keep track of the old days. But I also think there's something else going on in Hollywood. It's gotten more message-minded. There's always been messaging in films and TV shows. Often it's good or interesting or thoughtful. They can bring up an issue. They can, package it in a zombie movie, but still make you think. I think that can be wonderful. But I think what we're seeing now in the last few years is this sort of woke movement where the messaging is obvious. You might as well have like a highlighter on the screen saying, wait a minute, we're going to stop the movie to send you a message. And that's what happens. It's very clear. And often at its worst, even people on the left will be like, hey, wait a minute, that's enough. Can you stop?
That's the part that gets me.
Yeah.
Is that it's so annoying and so over the top. It's most artists filmmakers are able to kind of thread something in there if they want to push their agenda. They usually lead through entertainment. My example would be something like, 30 Rock. I thought 30 Rock was hysterical. I thought it was well done. They would go for the joke first.
Yes.
But because they were all socialists making it, or all progressives making it, the message is always, there was always a capitalism bad vibe to it. But they led with the joke, so I wanted to watch it.
And also,
they don't lead with a joke any longer.
They know that old show at its best actually would hit the left and hit the right as well, which was an extra benefit. But they don't do that as much anymore. It does happen, but it's annoying. A couple quick examples. A good example is back in the day, Dawn of the Dead, the classic zombie movie. It had zombies walking through the mall like zombies do. That was a comment on consumerism. It was brilliant. It wasn't flashing, look at this message. But a couple of quick examples. One is I was watching a horror movie a few months ago, and there was a bad person. And the bad person went out to the car, started up the car, and drove away. And the camera went to the bumper sticker in the car, and it was like a MAGA or pro-Trump. I'm like, wow, you just took me out of your movie. I knew that person was bad. I saw what they did 10 minutes ago. I didn't need that lecture. But there
Saturday
you go.
Night Live. All right, I grew up on Saturday Night Live. I will watch all the skits on YouTube, and the guys who do Weekend Update, they're funny, they're good. But it's just so ridiculously one-sided and late-night comics. I have given up all late-night comics for years. I remember the days of Johnny Carson, when it would be funny, and you really didn't know his politics. But the whole Jon Stewart and Oliver and all this stuff, I don't need it. It's not funny. when Jon Stewart would say something or have a picture and then say, "What the," and drop the F-bomb, it's like, all right, funny once, not funny 100 times. We get it. You don't like conservatives.
There's so many things to tackle on that subject. I'll mention a couple quickies. One is you have a landscape that's uniformly to the left. And for years, no one jumped in and said, hey, can we do a right-of-center show? Maybe that'll make some cash. And then recently, Gutfeld comes around, which is not a traditional late-night show, doesn't have a huge budget, and there are no A-list stars. You don't see Tom Hanks walking on the Fox News set for that show. And it's at or near the top right now. Why? Because people wanted an alternative. And also, late-night comedy is missing everything.
Yep.
If you look at what's happening in the culture today, who's in charge of the country, all the shenanigans going on, media malfeasance, you could do 1,000 monologues in a week.
How much of it is you cannot bite the hand that feeds? I've got a friend who's a SAG actor, so he's in the Screen Actors Guild, and he's not a political guy, but he shuts up.
Oh yeah.
Because you don't want to get blackballed, and there's this sense of no, we just do this, and I gotta think that permeates the writing staff and the directing staff and the actors and the whole thing. It's gotta be you've got to be one of us. It is lacking any real diversity.
It is, and for all the talk of diversity, which diversity on paper is a wonderful thing, but we don't see much of it from an ideological perspective. It's all the things you mentioned, though. It is the actors and comedians don't want to hurt their preferred party. The actors and comedians know if they kind of go off the reservation and they tell the jokes that can't be told, that there could be fallout from that. There's sort of a collective fear of just do what you're told, say the things you want to say. Joe Rogan had an interesting comment a few months ago. He said, when you go to Hollywood, you're a young actor, young actress, you arrive on the scene and you know that that's the atmosphere. And if you go in and say, I'm kind of a libertarian at heart, do you think that's going to hurt you? Of course it is. You're an unknown, and there's 6 people in the other room who are just as attractive and just as talented as you. You're done. So you shut up, or you kind of play the party line.
Well, let me push it the other way.
Yeah.
It's not like Hollywood has been apolitical before.
No. Yeah.
All right, we had some real hardcore, patriotic directors, and John Ford and John Wayne, and all those movies that were America was great, and you saw the guy who was the hero, the man who shot Liberty Valance, the American character, the quiet, strong hero that nobody celebrates because they don't know he's the hero. And so there really wasn't a whole lot of challenging that until the movies came in the 60s that really started taking on that establishment, and it blew Hollywood open.
Yeah.
Am I missing that?
No, I think it's a good summation. And there were some great movies in the mid to late 60s that sort of had that progressive spirit.
The Graduate.
Things like that, and that's fine. And that sort of opening up, having a broader canvas is good. And great movies, Bonnie and Clyde.
John Wayne could be a conservative. Those movies could be conservative. You could see him out there, pushing for Ike, or whatever. Today, isn't it the same thing that if you're going to be an actor, you can't do that. You have to be George Clooney and talk about how special we are in Hollywood and how we're better than everyone else because we've always been a little ahead of the curve. He actually said that at on an award show. And so they love to go out and be political spokesmen out in their outside world.
I mean, it's all a bunch of layers, though, because you've got the media, which encourages that activism from the left. You've got the actors themselves who promote it as well. You've got the press people who want you to be in that vein. There was an article sort of buried within an existing article about how these actors will virtue signal, that they know that that's sort of it's an advertisement for their next movie. That when they say something that's very progressive on social media, it's like a bat signal to their peers, like I think like you, I am like you, come hire me. And it's one of the reasons why they say things like that. When there's a Black Lives Matter, movement going on in the country, actors were tripping over themselves to kind of show their solidarity with that movement on social media. And then it was ironic that a couple, when they did that, they got in trouble for it. Mark Wahlberg tried to put out a very generic, let's have peace kind of message. And then the social justice warrior said, hey, wait a minute, you beat up some kids when you were a teenager and used some racial slurs, which he did do, which he did get in trouble for, which he's apologized profusely for. But that was like 30, 40 years ago, and now he's a grown man, he's a husband, a father, an A-list actor, he does all the right things. But they wanted to punish him. So it's so fast, it's all interesting, because you can't escape.
I'm going to take one more run at, I think, of what I was trying to get to, which was, all right, here we are, two cranky old white guys. Hollywood, blah, blah, blah. You know, there needs to be some conservative. You said Gutfeld does a great job. All right, there's one.
Yeah.
All right. Isn't there something to the fact that people on the right, libertarian, conservative, were not good with the creativity? Let me push this. That when I said 30 Rock led with humor first, and not with the punch. I've seen when the right does some things, usually they push the message so hard. The song I hate the most, sorry guys, is Proud to Be an American.
I knew you were going to say it.
Really? How did you know that? I just hate that. Not because it's a bad song, not because it's a bad message.
Yeah. It's
just so two-dimensional. You know, there it is. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing woven into a story. There's no subtlety to it. It's right. You know, and whereas, I don't know, Sting would sing, well, if the Russians love their children too. And there's this, it's more sophisticated, and the message is weaved in better. So I ask, is it because people on the right just cannot do art as well, cannot do communications as well, can't do the subtlety? Is it that whenever we do a movie, it comes out like Proud to Be an American?
Or God's Not Dead, which is very heavy-handed. You know, I feel like whether the right can be as sophisticated and creative as the left is kind of above my pay grade as a commentator, but it doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, we're all different, we all have different philosophies. But I also think there's an ecosystem in Hollywood that nurtures and blossoms and promotes people on the left. And so from their entire creative journey, they have, you know, encouragement, and they're part of a crowd, and they're kind of, they get the education along the way. Maybe this is an unfair comparison, but in recent years, faith-based films have been kind of a thing. And at first they were terrible, and they were crude, and they had no budgets, and the actors were very amateurish. But I've seen a very dramatic uptick in quality there. They're not often as good as a traditional film, but they've gotten significantly better in a very short period of time. And that was almost like this niche that really had to learn by itself. They weren't being nurtured by Hollywood. They were just had a kind of within their own little enclave. They grew, and they kept making movies and making movies and making movies, and they were kind of learning. You could see these filmmakers grow.
They had to build their own safe space.
Yeah.
And they had to make all their mistakes and learn
in public too.
Yeah, which is amazing. You know what I'm going to say here? South Park, for me, is the exception that proves the rule. What's different about South Park is that they push this message. It's a very libertarian, very anti-Hollywood. Oh, God, how they rip on Hollywood. It's beautiful. But they're so funny. They're so crass that truly religious people who are easily offended would hate this. But it's one of the few things that gets a libertarian-ish message out to a very different crowd.
Yeah.
It does not, you know, Gutfeld, great, but it sings to the choir. This doesn't. And I can't imagine how they've done 25 years of this, and it's still great.
Yeah, it's still pure. It still doesn't kind of go with the ebb and the flow of the culture, which is amazing. And they did take some heat. They weren't as hard on Trump. I'm sure they had some Trumpian moments within his reign. But I think I've read some negative articles about the show, like, why aren't you doing more Trump jokes? As if, you know, the zillion jokes that existed at that moment weren't enough.
There just wasn't enough anti-Trump.
But they seem to be they're in their own space, and they're resistant to sort of the trends that are going on, and they're very raw, and it's amazing they've been able to keep that voice so consistent for so long. And they're mostly beloved, and I think people on the right like them quite a bit, even though that they tease the right quite a bit.
Yeah.
But we're okay with that because they also tease the left quite a bit, and they do it in a very funny way.
I watched a movie recently on Netflix. It was called Don't Look Up.
Yes.
And oh my God, it's vomitous. You know, it is like everything else, corporate America is always the evil.
It hits a lot of obvious targets for sure.
Republican politicians are all Trump, and they are evil. Environmentalism is the good, and the planet will be destroyed unless we do the right, not the corporate thing. And it was just so predictable and bland. A few years back, I remember the Muppet movie came out, and my kids loved it. And the bad guy in the Muppet movie was Tex Richmond, Oil Man. Every movie is, he's the capitalist, he's the businessman, he's the big guy. Our hero will have to overcome capitalism. It's like, it's yawning. It's boring at this point.
I mean, it's amazing that the country is essentially still split 50-50 left and right, given all these sort of cultural forces lined up against people on the right. It is interesting. But the Don't Look Up is interesting as well because it got slammed by many hard left critics. It's got one of the lower ratings.
Because it was so poorly made.
I think even they recognized how condescending it was. It didn't make me laugh. It was very obvious. I mean, there's some clever moments in there for sure. But I think having these actors who are so full of themselves kind of wag your finger. But
especially Meryl Streep, who has done a string of movies lately where she plays that preachy character at the end or overplays the bad guy. It's like, oh, please, give me something else.
Yeah, she's a great actress, but she succumbs to that need to kind of really be the lecturer in chief. So that's what it is. And I think that's an example of the left kind of going too far. You mentioned the right; they're too obvious with their messaging. That's an example the other way. Something's
different. When you and I were kids, I grew up on Star Trek. I grew up on the only show that ever needed to be alive. And you look at it now, and it's just so stupid and kind of cheesy, but still, it had a lot of these weird Cold War messages. It had a lot of inclusion messages without it being in your face. I've been watching the latest Star Trek iteration, Discovery, and of course they have to have the trans person, and literally 80% of the show is people encouraging one another and getting in touch with their feelings and finding their better selves. Like, this is boring crap.
Yeah.
This is, special. Give me the guys running around in what looks like their pajamas and bad special effects and styrofoam rocks, rather than this slick stuff, which is just so boring. But we had a few places to go. Anybody our age, we say, beam me up, Scotty, or he's dead, Jim. All know. Talk to any youngster, they don't know what that means. But they have a million different options. Is there a possibility that it's now all these different marketplaces, 500 channels, YouTube, all these new platforms that we can get around Hollywood?
Well, it's happening. I mean, there are comedians out there who are very successful, thriving, and you'll never see them on The Tonight Show. They'll never be on Saturday Night Live. J.P. Sears, Ryan Long, Tim Dillon, of course, a fellow you may have heard of, Joe Rogan. These are major forces in the comedy networks, and they defy all the norms. They are not woke. Often they're very apolitical. Ryan Long is aggressively apolitical. So they are kind of creating their own little marketplace for themselves with YouTube, with podcasting, with going on stage, with Patreon, with saying, hey, you come throw a few bucks my way, and I'll make you laugh. So there's that. There are more documentaries coming from the right than before. The Federalist just put a first one. It's a bit crude, but they will get better as they go along. They're pretty smart people there. The Daily Wire is really kind of putting in, going in with both feet. Their first two projects, one is called Shut In, which is a home invasion thriller. Does that seem political? I don't think so. But it may be kind of raw, it may be kind of apolitical in a way, or maybe even a little bit punchy at times. And also Terror on the Prairie, which is the Gina Carano movie. She was an actress who was canceled by Disney wildly unfairly. It's a whole story unto itself. You can kind of Google it to get the story. And now she's working. And I actually met her. She was a delight. But she was someone who was canceled by traditional Hollywood, should be cast aside, should be looking for new work. And all of a sudden, Daily Wire says, you're going to produce this movie, you're going to star in this movie, and maybe we'll do some more with you. So there are some
That's
ways around
you say
it.
that. And it makes perfect sense that it's comedians first. Because comedians are going to offend people.
Yeah.
If they're doing a great job, 20% of their crowd is just going to be offended.
That's right.
And now they can't do any of that. So the Bill Burr, I think, It's hysterical, and he's politically incorrect. When Chappelle is becoming a conservative icon, oh my God, what the world is turned upside down because they can't do their craft in a cancel culture.
Well, here's the thing. If you're a comedian, you go out, you tell a joke. You wrote it last week, and then maybe it bombs, maybe it does fairly well, but doesn't get the reaction you want. So the next night you come back, you tweak it. You maybe add a word or two, you add an inflection or two, it gets better, gets a better reaction. By maybe week 3 or week 4, it's a great key part of your routine. But you can't do that sort of experimentation if you make a mistake, quote unquote, along the way, if there's a thought crime in there. And also comedians will push us in uncomfortable positions to make us think, to make us challenge the assumptions we have. So I remember when there was a Dave Chappelle special, it made me uncomfortable at times. I'm like, wait a minute, I get it. He's doing it on purpose. He's making me question why I think this way on a topic and kind of wrapping my head around it in a new way. And he's a genius at it. There's no one better. But that's what he was doing. He wasn't trying to be a racist or a sexist or anything hateful. He just wanted to make me laugh and think. And the best of them do that. And now, with all the heat that Dave Chappelle faces, good for him for standing up and surviving. But just think about the working man's comic, the guy or gal who's doing the clubs right now. Do they want to do those routines? Do they want to go anywhere near those routines? They may be canceled and shut out of the comedy world before they even get their feet wet. That's scary.
Doing nearly a quarter century of talk radio, there is a void, and there's only one sin, dead air. And because of that, you're improvising. You're saying stuff. And at some point, you're going to say something like nappy-headed hose, as one talk show host did.
Yeah.
And then you're Don Imus, and you will be canceled for it. So the self-censorship that happens when people speak freely and
extemporaneously?
That's what the word I was going to use, but
Okay.
I'm having a day today. Anyway, they're stuck. I mean, look at the guy who played Kramer on
Michael Richards.
Michael Richards. So he drops the N-word. He was trying to be funny. It didn't work. I saw the video of it. It bombed.
Yeah.
I don't think he was trying to be a racist, he was trying to get a laugh. He tried this, and it failed. Because if you're not failing a third of the time, you're not developing new material. You're not trying stuff. And so I think even the left has to be feeling very censored.
They are, and it's happening. And some of them, when they do get censored, they kind of have an epiphany moment, like, oh my gosh, maybe this cancel culture isn't as wonderful as it's supposed to be. But not always. Stephen Colbert, in recent months, has been like, the Dr. Seuss cancellations. Isn't that great? We love that. Mark Maron, who's a really pretty prominent podcaster, he's been a comedian for decades. Cancel culture is great. I think people who are critical of it, they've got it all wrong. They're just fascists. So and it's really funny because you look at Mark Maron's old stuff, and he's admitted this. It's not exactly politically correct. So I almost wonder if some of this posturing is, don't cancel me, I'm an ally.
So I'm having senior moments now with all these actors because I've got them out. The guy does a late night show.
Bill Maher?
No.
John
Anyway, he used to do the band show.
Oh, Adam Carolla, Jimmy Kimmel.
Jimmy Kimmel, not Adam Carolla is a good guy.
Yes,
Jimmy Kimmel, thank you. He's all this touchy-feely, wonderful. You can't cancel him because he's a progressive.
Yeah.
But I remember the Man Show, which he was with Carolla on, and at the end of the show, they would end it how?
Girls jumping on trampolines and bikinis.
Girls in bikinis jumping on trampolines.
Yeah.
It was misogynistic, but that in his past doesn't cancel him, isn't a threat. But you mentioned Wahlberg, anything is fair game from your entire life.
All right, Jimmy Fallon is less political, certainly leaning to the left now. He dressed as Chris Rock with blackface 20 years ago, and he had to do a mewling apology on The Tonight Show, and he certainly suffered as a result. And he went really far left after that. He kind of was he got told what to do. No, he got his education.
Do you remember Eddie Murphy in Whiteface?
Oh yeah, great. But I want to compare the two. Jimmy Kimmel is far left, aggressively so, is sort of an agent of the left. And he is dressed up as Oprah Winfrey multiple times, Karl Malone, in blackface.
That's right.
and he never had to publicly apologize. He eventually gave a written statement that was an apology, but it was more like an angry, terse, they made me do this because they want to, it was kind of like one of those.
He's a victim.
It was a victim, and it was a non-apology apology. What's the difference? Because he's more political.
Tell me about virtue bombs.
Yeah,
I've been looking forward to this. You've been talking about it for a long time.
Someone approached me, a publisher, we're having a conversation, and they said to me, we should write a book together, which is flattering. And I said, oh, okay, I've never written a book. And then I'm thinking, well, what would I write about? And it was like, there's one topic I could write about, and it's this. It's cancel culture, it's the woke agenda, it's how it's crushing Hollywood. And I come from a place where I love Hollywood. I was a failed art major, and I thought, I want to be a movie critic because I love movies. And I based my whole mediocre career on that. I'm not rich, I'm not successful, but I'm able to make a living covering Hollywood, and I love it. It's my passion.
Because you do it with a different angle, through a different set of lenses.
That helps me survive as well, for sure. But it does come from a place of passion. But the last few years, I'm thinking, what is going on in the culture? For all the things we talked about today, comedians not being able to tell the jokes they want to do. You can't make Blazing Saddles today, even though it's a stinging attack on racism. You can't make that. I mean, that statement alone should be a wake-up call to everyone about how bad the culture is, where, you can't have certain people in certain roles. You cannot act, if you're a gay actor, it should be, if you're making a role about someone with disabilities, it needs to be someone who has the disability to star in that role. There's been blowback recently that Javier Bardem, who is, I think he's Spanish. I hope I have his ethnicity right. Well, he played a Cuban in Being the Ricardos,
right.
Desi Arnaz.
Did a
there was
fine job.
blowback about that. It's all
He's
over.
an actor.
I know, I know.
The idea is that you're an actor.
But that's what's going on.
You're not actually that person.
Yes.
You act. If you're playing FDR and they put you in a wheelchair,
that's right.
You don't have to be disabled.
Yeah.
You just have to act that way.
And part of this is Hollywood has a real guilt complex for good reason.
Really?
Because for years, they didn't let minorities have a seat at the table. There were many, many white faces on the screen and not enough people of color on the screen. I'm sure the people pulling the strings in Hollywood are mostly white old males. So I think they know that they've been wrong. And I think that the culture at large has been more progressive in that way than Hollywood.
So he's not Cuban, but let's remember in the 50s, that Cuban, not what you called mainstream America, was one of the most famous actors there was.
And an innovator, too, behind the scenes at the I Love Lucy show.
You got some explaining to do.
Yeah, exactly. So there's so much of that going on. And there's actually a whole, you mentioned with Roger Ebert earlier, I started a chapter about woke movie critics with an old clip that someone sent me like a year ago. Siskel and Ebert, mid-90s, talking about political correctness and how it was the death of movie criticism and how awful it was.
Both of them.
Both of them. I mean, in a way...
Which is funny because since I spent some time with Roger Ebert, he was a fascinating guy. He was no libertarian.
Oh,
he was
no, he's a very progressive fellow.
He was remarkably progressive.
But back in the 90s, he would put that aside, or that was just part of his persona.
Yeah.
But he knew, as a film critic, he couldn't judge films based on that. It's a fascinating exchange. It's all in the book. And then I kind of extrapolate on that to say, these are how critics today measure movies. And it's not good, bad, indifferent. It is there enough representation in here? What are the messages? If it's a right-of-center message, recoil. My favorite example is that there was a critic who reviewed a movie called Kin. It's about some space aliens and this teenager is trying to protect his family. And the teenager gets a space gun. And he's going to use that space gun to help his family. The critic went ballistic, gave it an F, and said, how dare you put a gun in a teenager's hands with what's going on in the culture today? Is that a fair review?
Talk to me about the revisionism in a couple different ways. One is the god-awful George Lucas revisionism. Han Solo shot first. All right? He wasn't self-defense.
Yeah.
But he had to change that, and he ruined a character.
Yeah.
He turned a good, Rick from Rick's Cafe kind of character into a complete pansy. You had Steven Spielberg take out rifles and put walkie-talkies in the guy's hands. So they're literally going backward in time and digitizing out things that they don't like now. That's awful enough.
Yeah.
Now the apology tours of, take a great film like Gone with the Wind, and you have to have a Surgeon General's warning on this, that, this will offend some people. It's Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
Do we need that when we do Blazing Saddles. This is disturbing that you have to apologize for works of art that might well have been racist at the time, but I want to see them as they were made at that time.
Well, we're bubble wrapping everyone intellectually. We can't handle that. You can't be offended. You can't be. I'm offended they made 5 or 6 Police Academy movies, but where's my safe space that existed? I lived through that. It was horrible.
I lived through it too. We went through some bad stuff.
It's really scary, but it's this sense that we can't explain things, we can't contextualize things. It's really dangerous. I mean, the 80s movies are just, as much as we reboot things, there's this sense, Molly Ringwald became a superstar because of John Hughes, and she's been on a tear in recent years saying those movies are all problematic. How dare you? I mean, it's the ultimate, or the ultimate is the Harry Potter trio, the actors saying that not only do I not agree with J.K. Rowling's stance on trans issues, but we're basically distancing ourselves from them. She made you rich and famous beyond your wildest dreams, and because you have a difference of opinion. And again, she's not hateful about it. She has a different view, but she, embraces trans people, and she would march for them, she said. But there are nuances to her thinking on that topic that you may disagree with. But they just shut her out. She's a non-person now. And she's one of the few people who will not back down, who will not apologize. And yes, she's got bundles of money, but plenty of people with bundles of money, like Stephen King and Scarlett Johansson, they buckle in a second when the cancel culture crowd comes for them.
I watch movies with my kids, and I'll watch Frozen. Great movie. I think we watched Frozen 2, and I liked it because there wasn't a male hero. I hated all those Disney films. That's why I liked Princess and the Frog. And I said to my daughter, this is a great movie because she wasn't rescued. She did the rescuing. And that was good. I can understand why girls liked Frozen. And we're there in the city of Arendelle, and it's up north someplace. And I say, so sweetie, how is it that that guard is black? Well, how did that black guy come from Africa 600 years ago to the frozen wasteland? Or when they go back and they redid, Disney did something in the Tramp, Lady and the Tramp. If you remember the movie, they had that scene with the Siamese cats. I am Siamese, if you please. Oh my God! All right, I guess you can't do that. But the mixed race couple there, that's fine. But this is 100 years ago in I forget where. There is no mixed race couple back then.
Yeah.
And my daughter's like, "Oh, Dad, just let it go." It's like, but here's my. I love finding errors in continuity. You know how they clip here and the guy's beer is this full, and then there's this full, and then it's that full again. I also love it when I see somebody take a phone, and it's an old time, but they have the modular jack on the cord. Stupid little thing. So I see Malcolm X talking on the phone. It's like, that phone hasn't been invented for another 15 years. How are you? And it just kind of pulls you right out. It says, all right, it ruins the moment. The political correctness and the forced racial and trans diversity kind of pulls me out of those movies.
It does. I mean, that is the spell that movies cast upon you. You get lost in a new world and a new story and new characters. You get swept away. You don't want to get taken out of the experience. Another example, Jungle Cruise, I think it was, the Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt movie from about a year ago. And it's set in the early 1900s. And then one of the characters comes out, admits that he's a gay person. And then The Rock, this big rough and tumble captain guy, is like basically puts his arm around him. I'm kind of paraphrasing visually, but so you're okay with me. Now, that's wonderful, and that's amazing, and I wouldn't want nothing else from a likable character. But this is like 1910. That just wouldn't happen.
When
it just
they
wouldn't
arrested
happen.
Gay people.
I mean, again, maybe you don't have that in that movie.
Right.
I have no problem with any sort of community.
It's not a space movie. Exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you wanted, I know that's a Disney movie, we're talking about Disney movies, but if you wanted to have that character, you could do that character and still be true to the movie. And in fact, I find the gay rights movement just fascinating. How the entertainment world played such a large role in advancing the gay rights movement. It's incredible. And before that, sometimes there would be gay characters, and you know they were gay, but they never said anything that
Yeah.
was gay. They would send out a signal, or you'd find out later, and that caused an issue for them, and then it really got you to think. Those were well done. Now it's just, all right, let's sit down. Where's our trans character? Great. Where's our biracial couple? Okay. Where's okay.
But I do hate the movies that are set in the past where they have these moments that yank you right out of it. The recent being The Ricardos, I mentioned that before. There's a scene where one of the screenwriters, who's a woman, is talking to I Love Lucy, Nicole Kidman as Lucille Ball. And it's a conversation you would hear last week.
Yeah.
About empowerment, about female representation.
They even
Again,
use
these are interesting themes.
They use modern slang that they would never have used in 1957.
I think gaslit maybe was
Yeah,
used.
they used gaslight. I was watching the same thing. I was enjoying this and oh my God, and what it is the same thing as I was saying about the phone with a modern technology.
But that's a mistake. That's a miscue.
That's a mistake. But still, it pulled me out.
Yeah, and the writer-director is Aaron Sorkin, who's a very talented fellow, who's certainly of the left, but doesn't matter for this conversation. And he is known for his great screenwriting. He writes banter like no one else. It's funny, it's crisp, it's interesting, and he did that. He made that mistake in a movie he should know better. And these are minor things, but when you add them all up, it is more significant culturally.
And it's not. The beautiful thing about being in a movie is you're lost. If you do it right, you're lost. And so the errors in continuity,
You're better. I miss those. You're better than I am, I will say.
I used to do stage lighting.
Okay.
Right, so I know lighting, and this has nothing to do with your virtue bombs, but. Two people are out in the field, they're face to face, they're talking, and the guy's got this beautiful backlight on him because the sun's shining down, and then they show the other guy, and he is also perfectly backlit with the sun shining down, which means we live in a universe where there's two suns.
Is that Tatooine? I forget.
Yeah,
is that
it's Tatooine. And I look at that and I go, you've lost me. Somebody just ruined this movie for me. I'm that guy. Nobody wants to watch a movie with me.
Don't sit behind you in the theater, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. So... we're frustrated. We've gone over a few examples of things that will work. I've come to the realization you're not going to change Hollywood. You're going to change with your dollars. We're not going to enlighten them. I found it fascinating when Francine McDormand, when she won for her Academy Award for 3 Billboards. It's a great movie. And the last thing she said was, I'm going to leave you with 2 words on her acceptance speech. Diversity writer. And then she went off stage. Now this was brilliant public relations because what happens, every Hollywood reporter has to go, what the hell is that? I don't know what that is. And then they talk about it and then they make news stories. And she wants every actor to demand a diversity writer to say that there will be racial, gender identity, religious diversity among not just the acting staff, but the production staff, the props, the lights, the workers, the caterers, the screenwriters. All right, I'll give you that. Can we use the exact same logic and say, if you really want diversity, there has to be ideological diversity. Because if you had, I swear to God, if you had 20% of the writers were conservative or libertarian, 20% of the writers at Saturday Night Live were that way, it would open up that art to a whole new people. I think it would make a better product.
Oh, yeah.
I think she's right. We want diversity. Why won't they include ideological diversity?
Because they don't consider that diversity.
Tell me why.
Because they don't even respect that point of view. There are many actors who will, I think Seth MacFarlane comes to mind. He's the creator of Family Guy, who rails night and day about Fox News and how evil it is and how wrong it is. I guarantee he would love to have Fox News off. The Thanos snap, it goes away. Well, people on the right can't have the one major news network that speaks to them. Why not?
You kind of remind me of him. You kind of have that kind of a look in the
I don't
voice.
sing like him though. I sing terribly. He's a great singer.
But at the same time, even he had Rush Limbaugh on as a guest character.
Would he do it now? I mean, obviously Rush has passed, sadly.
Yeah.
But would he
I
do
would
those?
hope so.
I don't think so. I don't think he would.
He also takes some good swipes at pompous, smug elitists. When the dog, I forget the dog's name.
Oh, not Stewie. I forget as well.
No, all right. Well, we're terrible.
And by the way, that show should be canceled by the cancel culture bylaws. I watch it with my son. and they get away with fat shaming and all sorts of shenanigans.
Because they're funny.
No, but I don't want them canceled. But
No,
I'm
I
saying,
want them canceled.
and one of the things that my book talks about is the inconsistency. Why is Bette Midler not canceled? Why is Alec Baldwin not canceled, even before the shooting incident? Why is Jimmy Kimmel not canceled? Why are these people who spread vicious, hateful comments across the ecosystem? They're not canceled, though, because they're left of center. They have a measure of protection. They're not fully protected, but they have a measure of protection. Bette Midler has said some of the most horrible things about Senator Rand Paul, that I think if she said about maybe Senator Bernie Sanders, she might be gone. Might be looking for work.
Tell me that there's a double standard. Explain to me, because we know it's there. You see it all the time. And when you try to say there's a double standard, I call it my 180 test. And I say if this happened in reverse, and it was a conservative saying that about a liberal, what would happen?
Yeah.
If it was a Democrat instead of a Republican. And I do that mostly with politics. And you realize, and mostly in the media, what stories would be running and aren't running. I see it in Hollywood.
Oh, yeah. But here's the dirty little secret, which is I finally realized the people who are committing the double standard, the media, Hollywood, they don't care. You could have a billboard in New York City that explains it in black and white. They don't care. I see journalists on Twitter, and they will say something, and then they'll have some very mature, pointed comments in the replies, saying, "Oh no, you're wrong," spelling it out oh so clearly, and then tomorrow they'll do the same story with the same angle. They don't care. There's no repercussions.
All right,
the media won't jump on them. There's no fallback.
So help me,
Yeah.
because now that we're old and cranky, I got a lot of friends who go, "I can't buy this guy's record anymore. I used to love." Going to a Springsteen concert, 3-hour concert, he gave it.
Yeah.
I can't do it anymore. I can't give him any money. And I go back and forth. For me, Beatles are Beatles. They're as close to God as you're going to get. And I see what Paul McCartney does, and it's like, well, I still see him when I give him money, and I'm conflicted. Part of me says, hey, I'd buy Ben & Jerry's. They're because the product is so good, it outweighs the stupidness of their socialism. All right, and so advise me, as a consumer of this, should I not buy that product?
It's obviously a personal choice. I kind of go between, I don't care if an actor is left of center. My wife is left of center. My wife's a Bernie bro. It's a whole different story.
What the hell, man? Oh, we are talking after this. We are having a conversation.
The 2016 election results that didn't go well in my family. But there's a difference between that and someone maybe like a Sacha Baron Cohen, who are just like, I want Trump off social media. I mean, there are people who just want to silence people on the right, voices on the right. So there's a bit of a demarcation there for me. But I think it's much more important, no matter where you go in that sort of the decision-making process, if there's a right-of-center project that is halfway good, you go support it, you promote it, you fund it, because if you want to have different voices, you've got to promote that. That is more effective. When Clint Eastwood makes a movie like Richard Jewell, which was brilliant, beautifully acted, and it tanks at the box office despite embracing many values that conservatives hold dear, that's on us.
All right, then give me some of the ones we should be doing. I'll throw out a couple. I watched Chernobyl, which was an HBO thing, and it was fascinating that I watched it, and the message to me was plain as day, that communism kills people, that the lack of honesty and transparency is deadly.
Yes.
Other people watched it and said, see, I told you nuclear energy was awful, and it got a completely different.
I actually like art like that, when you're allowed to interpret it in different ways. I think it speaks to the strength of the art and its welcoming.
It was well done.
I agree. I saw some of it. I thought I agree. But the person who created it, when some conservatives embraced it, he did not like that at all.
Really?
It's fascinating to watch. When conservatives embrace certain elements of pop culture, the people who create it, if they're left of center, which is often the case, they don't take to that very kindly.
Fascinating.
Oh yeah.
So we should just love their products to death and find the conservative messages in them and drive them crazy.
That would help.
You liked The Death of Stalin, I think it's what it's called.
Yeah.
I watched it. I also liked it, but I didn't know what it was. Was it supposed to be a comedy?
Oh, yeah.
Was it supposed to be
gosh.
this? It kind of went back and forth, but it really showed how awful they were.
Yeah, well, you can say that 70 years after the fact.
Yeah.
Now it's safe.
All right, give me a few more. Give me a few more that I should see.
Oh, gosh, I think here's a project that's in development right now. My Son Hunter, by a fellow McAleer, is a kind of a provocateur on the right. He had to crowdfund it. Gina Carano's in it. Robert Davi, the actor, is directing
this
it.
This guy who usually does documentaries.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
He does
I
a
know
lot
him
of
well.
different things.
Yeah, I know him well.
But, he has struggled to get funding for that. So, a film adaptation of Hunter Biden, that we should flood it with cash.
How do we flood it with cash? Where do
Well,
people go?
they often have like a crowdfunding campaign at times. But even just, we all feel helpless at times. But we all can do little measures. So if there's a crowdfunding campaign and you're limited in funds like you're a journalist, then maybe give $10. But if enough people give $10, that's a windfall. You share it on social media. You tell your friends about it. You give it a good review somewhere, anywhere.
Mystery Science Theater 3000 was going to do a reboot, a movie, and they crowdfunded.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of the movie, if you watch it, it's got like 10,000 names on it. And you look and you find your name. And it used to be that only wealthy people could produce a movie. Producer means I put up the money in hopes that I get it back. And now with crowdfunding, that can be very, very different. Is there like one place you go to learn about that?
Well, I have a website. I often will promote things like that. There are other like-minded people. You can go to,
if you were better at public relations, you would give the URL.
I'm about to do that. Of course, my website is Hollywood in Toto because my last name is Toto. But, like-minded resources like that are where you learn about these things, for sure. And there's no really one-stop shop that has everything. Yeah. You have to be a little bit creative and inventive. But when you see these things, you should support them. They need your help. If there's a Patreon account, maybe give them a little bit of money that way. But just there's so many little things you can do, small measures.
Promote them and get your friends to watch them.
And when Richard Jewell came out, I remember talking to people online about it. I'm going to wait till I get it. I'm going to wait till it comes home to theater. No, I get that, but you just send a message. By doing that and waiting like 6 months, you said, I don't want to see that in a movie theater. And then if enough people send that message, then you don't get that art. We have more power than ever before. The technology barriers have broken down in significant ways. You can make a pretty slick documentary with very little money, and these are all wonderful innovations. But if we don't use our collective power, then nothing happens, nothing changes.
Last question. I understand religious films are done that way, and they're getting better. I understand Clint Eastwood movies, all which have been just incredible. Give me funny movies that are okay. There was one that the guy who plays Fraser was in, and it was god-awful. And it was by the guy who did Airplane or something. It was meant to be funny. It wasn't.
Oh, American Carol.
Yeah, it was
Even
terrible.
he admitted that it was he led with the message more than he should have.
Exactly.
David Zucker was great. Great talented filmmaker.
He is a great talent, but it stunk because, again, it was message first. So other than South Park, and these guys are not conservatives, they happen to be libertarian-ish, but that's not what drives them.
Yeah.
So give me something that's funny and offensive. Give me the Animal House that a libertarian likes.
This is my conundrum. To me, this is the biggest money-making opportunity that is just laying on the table, waiting for someone to make an outrageous, off-the-wall, politically incorrect, outrageous, crazy comedy that pokes your thumb at the sort of the PC crowd, is insulting but riotously funny. I'm waiting for that movie. I don't know if it's being made right now. I have no idea what the progress of it is. I contribute to the Daily Wire. They're making movies now, but they're looking at more. One's a Western, one's a thriller. I don't know if they've got comedy in mind. I don't know. I'm not in the inner circle. But I'm desperately waiting for that because it would be amazing. And it might even be healing in a weird way.
If you don't know where it is, ain't nobody knows where
but
it is.
I will say that there are smaller examples. The Ryan Long does every Monday he has a new sketch. And they're not all hits, like a Saturday Night Live. Some are good, some are bad. But when they hit, they are out of the park home runs.
His name
again? Amazing. Ryan Long. He's a Canadian comic. He moved to New York about a year or two ago. He's not political. He despises the woke crowd. And maybe his greatest video is, and I'm going to paraphrase it, when the woke and the racists agree on things.
Oh, I think I've seen that.
It's brilliant on so many levels. And it's smart, it's thought-provoking, it's very funny, it's beautifully assembled. That's where I go for comedy now. I podcast. Tim Dillon has a podcast, which is irreverent. It feels like Howard Stern maybe 20 years ago when he was dangerous and irreverent and was willing to go to places that were dark and dangerous, but still be interesting and thoughtful and smart and cool. There's no comedies like, I mean, when was the last time you saw a movie comedy that had you howl? The Free Guy was fine, Ryan Reynolds, but it wasn't that R-rated, crazy comedy.
This is where I miss the guy who did Groundhog Day.
Harold Ramis? Or
Ramis.
Bill?
Yeah, Ramis was funny in that, up yours to the man.
Yeah, it was the slobs versus the snobs.
Right.
That
Whether
whole
it was
period.
Animal House,
Caddyshack. I'm not sure if he was working with
but it was all the same, giving it to the man.
Yeah.
And then Ghostbusters, which he had a lot to do with, which was a celebration of capitalism. I'm sure he didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
It's the government that comes in, screws everything up, the guy from the EPA lets out all the ghosts, and entrepreneurs have to come and save the city.
But I think that's where comedy often flows from an organic point of view. I don't think he was looking to send a message, but he felt in his soul that was something intrinsically funny, and that was a gateway to a story that he wanted to tell. And I think it's one of the things with the woke situation where it's like it blocks those creative paths. You're thinking, okay, I can't tell that story. I can't do that character. I've got to include this group and that group. So all of a sudden, the creative process has got all these different stop signs. And I can't help but think that hurts.
So, in a previous life, back when I had a real job, I also had a passion. I wanted to become a cartoonist.
Oh.
And so I did a daily cartoon, got it into about 50 newspapers. The idea was to be a libertarian or conservative Doonesbury or Bloom County, the great ones. And every time I got into a paper, I got pulled out of a paper because I would offend somebody.
Yeah.
And
you?
Yeah, go figure. and after a while, I found myself trying to do this cartoon. It's like, oh, that's fine. And you end up shooting down, silencing yourself, and then you just get jammed. It destroys creativity, and worse, it destroys expression, which I thought was a liberal shared value.
It no longer is. It no longer is.
I always like talking with you. All right, Virtue Bombs, where do I buy it?
Anywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookshop should be there as well. And I hope people check it out. And it really is, there's a lot of sharp elbows in it, but it is from a place of love. And even the first chapter, I kind of tell my story and why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. I'd love for 2 years to go by and we kind of reassemble and have a conversation, and we're talking about the greatest comedies of the last 2 years, or the freedom that is kind of rebirthed around the culture. I don't think it's going to happen. And when I wrote the book, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be great if this woke culture went away and I'd sell 0 books, but I'd be happy as a clam. But we're not there.
All right, last question. Best TV show ever?
Modern Family.
Really?
My wife and I, we just recently rewatched the entire run. Laugh out loud funny in a way that very few shows are. Depth of character, extreme. I mean, I can't pick a great performer out of that bunch. I think Ty Burrell is the best as Phil Dunphy, but the performances are so locked in. And I watched it from the very beginning. And episode 1 was a little shaky. They weren't there yet. Episode 2, they're off to the races. 11 seasons, amazing, and insights into the human character, into family.
Isn't that a wildly progressive show? You look at the characters.
Yes and no.
You've got gays, you got interracial couples, you got adopted kids. I mean, it's.
If you watch the show, what they really are talking is sort of the layers and nuance, and they actually for a long time were making fun of that. There's a great episode where the gay couple they're trying to get their child into a very special elite preschool. And the lady says, "You're a gay couple with an Asian child. You're in." And then in walks a lesbian couple where one lesbian is physically handicapped, and I think maybe they had a black child. And the gay couple's like, "Oh, we're out," So they can make fun of these things in ways that are that are not mean, that are really kind of aware of the culture at large. I think there were episodes of that show that were maybe 4 or 5 years old that you couldn't do today. They were very self-aware, very self-aware. And they didn't, obviously the gay couple was significant. There was a marriage in the show once gay couples were able to get married, and you could certainly say that that's a message there. But they really, but these were really flawed characters, this gay couple. They're adorable, they're lovable. But, Cam is just a drama queen, and Mitchell is just persnickety and short, and, they infuse these characters with significant flaws because we all have them. And I don't know if you do that today.
They also did something that The Simpsons did, which was dysfunctional family. Oh my God, what a dysfunctional family. Out of control. But it's a good family.
Yeah,
they love each other.
Absolutely,
They're
the
tight.
bonds
It is
in this family.
a tight family.
And Julie Bowen, who, as my wife knows, the crush extends beyond the universe. She was a stay-at-home mom for much of it, and that was really important to her. Then when her kids got old enough, she went out into the workplace, but that's a very conservative message as well. So it's not as easy to label as you think, and it's a great show.
Small screens have exploded into a new art form. Growing up, only crap was on TV. You had to go to the theater. Now it seems to have switched. Something like Breaking Bad, which is now probably 10 years old, I don't know what it is, was such a beautifully well-paced, dramatic, dark comedy. I think it might have been the best thing I've ever seen on television.
There was one season I thought was mesmerizing, and it ended in a way that my jaw literally dropped when I watched it. And I thought each of those episodes
had an ending that was fitting of. It didn't do a Sopranos ending.
Exactly, but also I think when you watch the show, it was almost like a movie each week. The production values, the cinematography, the acting performances were all top notch. And when you and I were kids, you could watch a TV show, and within 8 seconds you say, "Oh, it's a TV show."
Yeah,
it looked weird. The actors weren't as good. The dialogue's maybe a little cornier.
Very two-dimensional.
It was very obvious. But now movies and TVs...
The beautiful thing about both Modern Family and I think particularly Breaking Bad is that every character is good and bad. That there's, it's not... and they do it so right. And you're right there cheering for Walter White. Oh, he's winning, good for Walter. And then as soon as he has that victory, they punch you in the gut by showing you the damage that his success is causing. That's brilliant.
It's brilliant.
All right, the book, Virtue Bombs. Buy it everywhere. Buy 2 copies.
3.
How's that for PR?
I'm getting better at PR.
You're getting there.
3, please. 3. Everyone.
Christian, always fun.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.